So the Mavericks enter the finals as pretty hefty underdogs, and I'm not going to act like that isn't without reason, because the Celtics are a very good team, and they match up pretty nicely with the Mavs. But with that said, I do think the Mavericks stand a really solid chance to win the finals. And to start off, as any discussion on why the Mavericks have a chance for anything, you have to begin with Luka Doncic. He is obviously their best player, and moreover, I think he is pretty obviously the best player in this series as a whole, because Jason Tatum is a fantastic player, but he just does not compare to Doncic, at least at this point in their careers. Doncic did better against the number one ranked defense in the playoffs in Minnesota than Tatum did against an average to below average one in Indiana. That alone is pretty telling, but additionally, Luka in the regular season averaged an additional 7 points, 5 assists, 1 rebound, and 2 percentage points better true shooting percentage. Those are not insignificant in any regard. The 7 points in particular is extremely notable, and doing so on better efficiency is just ridiculous to think about. So Doncic is pretty head and shoulders above Tatum, I would say, especially with Luka caring more and more about his defense. He has become a very good defender in these playoffs. I'm not sure if he's always going to be one, but he's at least shown that when he tries, he can be a legitimate stopper as a defender. I don't remember who said this, but it was on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. It's still Twitter to me, dang it. That Doncic had the best defensive field goal percentage allowed on anyone that had, I believe it was 50 or more defenses. So that is pretty darn impressive. And Irving was also rather high on that list as well, if I remember correctly. I really wish I could have retrieved it, but I didn't save it. So you're just going to have to go off my word. Maybe you saw something similar as well. Regardless, Luka, even just the eye test would tell you that he's playing good defense, and the same for Irving. So that's pretty good for the Mavs. They've always had the offense, and now they have the defense from their two best guys as well. That's really hard to go against. And what really takes them to another level, though, is the fact that there appears to be no way to defend Luka, because Minnesota, who arguably has a better defense than Boston does, was at a complete loss as they tried switching defenders, fighting over screens, blitzing pick and rolls. They did everything they possibly could have, and they had no good results. Basically, when Luka wanted to score, he would score. If they really sold out to stop him from scoring, he was going to play make and find the open guy, and then they were going to score. So the offense was basically unstoppable for Dallas, and I could see the same happening against Boston because, like I said, Minnesota arguably had a better defense than Boston did. Statistically, that was very clear. They had the better defensive rating, and just stylistically, they had all of the players to make things difficult for Doncic, with Gobert being difficult for Doncic to score against in the paint, and a good point of attack defender in Jaden McDaniels and Anthony Edwards as well, continually thrown at Luka. They still had no success, basically, throughout the entire series. So Boston might face those same struggles in guarding a near-perfect player in Luka, a superstar, or at least a very, very high-end star in Kyrie Irving, and then a solid supporting cast as well. Also, I have greater trust in Kyrie Irving than I do Jaylen Brown. Irving he's been a little bit inconsistent in the playoffs, but he's still really put up good numbers and looked the part as well. He's basically perfect as an offensive player as well, aside from his inconsistent games. So that's really hard. You're going against two just incredibly talented scorers, and in the case of Luka, a premier playmaker as well. And Irving is not bad as a playmaker either. So with all that said, Irving is super reliable as a scorer, and he's increased his defensive identity as well. Jaylen Brown, still a very good defender and a very good player in his own right, but he struggles to go left, and that is really apparent, and it becomes more glaringly apparent as the playoffs go on, because then the tendencies just really reveal themselves, and Dallas has such a good defense that if you have a weakness, they're going to attack it, and that could really be problematic for Brown because he basically only can go right, and they're going to force him to go left, so he's going to have to show that he's capable of doing that. Also, during the regular season, Irving averaged 3 more points, 1 more assist, and 3 percentage points better true shooting percentage at the expense of just 1 less rebound a game. So definitely give me Irving over Brown. Another thing I like for Dallas is that this one's a little bit arguable if it's a plus or not, but I think it very much so is that Dallas had a much harder path to the finals. So they've shown what they've been made of in that process. Boston has basically had a bye to the finals, which could actually be detrimental to them because they've accumulated some rust in the process and become lax, basically not needing to make adjustments throughout that entire period because the teams they were facing in a perfect state were not very good, and they were also incredibly banged up, the opposing teams Dallas faced. So you add that all together, and Boston really just had a cakewalk into the finals. The Mavericks were tested. OKC was the number 1 seed in the West. Minnesota was tied for the number 1 seed in the West. The West is also better than the East in general, so being tied for number 1 in the West carries a little bit more weight than it does in the East, even though, again, the Celtics were very impressive in the regular season in the East. There's been a challenge for Dallas in every round, and they've come through in every way. So I like that for Dallas. I'm a little bit concerned about that for Boston. Another thing I'm very concerned about for Boston, too, is that Porzingis is still out for an undisclosed amount of time, and he's arguably Boston's second best player. That is something that might get me flamed for saying, because I think a lot of people just think it's Jaylen Brown and there's no contest. But Porzingis is a defensive anchor for them. He's also a very good offensive player that's more than capable of getting you a very efficient 20 points a night. So he brings a lot to the table. And again, it's unclear on just how long he's going to be out for. So if he misses any stretch of time, that's really going to be advantageous for Dallas because this is a close series to begin with. And you add in then that Boston could be without their second best guy. That's really going to swing things. Especially, too, we don't know what percentage Porzingis is going to be at. For all we know, when he comes back, he's going to be at 70% or even worse. That is pretty nervous-inducing if I'm the Celtics. I think that with Porzingis possibly missing time, I would actually lean the Mavericks for any game that he's not playing in. And I think that if he's not at 100%, there's also a very reasonable path for the Mavericks to win as well. Those are my thoughts on how the Mavericks can win this series. Be sure to let me know what yours are in the comment section below. And also be sure to like and subscribe for more content.